שלום לכם, ברוכים הבאים למפגש השני שלנו בסדרת המפגשים עם מנהלים מרחבי העולם, כדי להעשיר את עצמנו מורים ומנהלים כאן בישראל. מיד נהיה עם הרב ספנסר לואיס, מנהל תיכון יבנה בלונדון, בריטניה, אחד מבתי הספר המצליחים, גם מבחינה יהודית, גם מבחינה אקדמית, נחשב למספר אחד בהישגים הלימודיים שלו, מחנך ילדים מבתים דתיים וגם מכאלה שאינם ממש דתיים, ובכל זאת רוצים להגיע לבית הספר שלו. נדבר עם הרב ספנסר על 5 תקופות בחייו ו5 דברים שהוא למד בתקופות האלה, מילדות עד הקורונה, כולל תקופה שלו כאן בישראל, הוא בא ללמוד גם כאן איתנו ומאיתנו. אבל קודם כל, אנחנו אומרים שוב תודה לתכנית רוץ להעשרה רוחנית, וגם רוצים לפתוח בדברי פתיחה קצרצרים, מיד אחריהם הראיון מלונדון עם הרב ספנסר, אבל ברכתו של המפקח הארצי על העל יסודי, בועז קולומבוס, ואנחנו מתחילים.
שלום וברכה, שלום מנהלים, שלום למנהל בית ספר יבנה בלונדון, שמח לפגוש את כולכם. אנחנו בתקופה מעניינת, שנתיים האחרונות בעצם נותנות לנו הזדמנות מרתקת, לראות איך אפשר להתמודד עם מציאות לימודית, פדגוגית, חינוכית, ערכית, שונה ממה שהכרנו עד היום. בעבר היינו בתודעה שהלמידה הטובה והאפקטיבית היא כשיש מורה שרואה את התלמידים שלו בכיתה מקרוב, יכול לראות אותם, יכול לראות אותם מקרוב, ללמד אותם בכיתה מול הלוח או מול המחשב. השנתיים האחרונות לימדו אותנו שלמידה יכולה להיות גם אחרת. וזה גם קשור לעובדה שלמידה יכולה להיות חוצת גבולות ובעצם למידה גלובלית. תלמיד מלונדון יכול ללמוד יחד עם תלמיד במדינת ישראל, ולחוות חוויה ערכית, פדגוגית, לימודית, כמעט באותה מידה מול אותו מורה שמלמד אותו. ולכן בעיניי, לצד האתגרים הגדולים שהקורונה זימנה לנו, יש לנו בהיבט של חינוך וחינוך יהודי בפרט, הזדמנות מאוד מאוד גדולה. הזדמנות לייצר קשר דרך למידה, לא רק דרך חוויות עוטפות למידה, חוויות דרך למידה משותפת של מוסדות חינוך בארץ ובתפוצות, דרך האמצעים שכל כך פותחו בעקבות השנתיים האחרונות של הקורונה. אני חושב שזאת הזדמנות נהדרת, לא לייצר רק מפגשים חד פעמיים, אלא אפשרות לייצר ממש למידה משותפת בחברותות, בכיתה, בתחומי דעת משותפים, בין כל היהודים בתפוצות ובארץ, ודרך זה לייצר קשר וקרבה, שלעתיד לבוא יכולה להועיל לכולנו בהיבטים לאומיים, בהיבטים של חיבור בין קהילות בארץ ובתפוצות. אני חושב שהאתגר שהקורונה זימנה לנו, רק מחדדת לנו את ההבנה שקשר הוא לא חייב להיות תלוי במגע ישיר ופיזי, קשר יכול להיבנות ולהיות גם כשנמצאים מרחוק, בצורה לא פחות משמעותית, ובצורה שמאפשרת לנו באמת את אותו קשר לא רק דרך דיבור או צפייה משותפת, אלא דרך ממש לימוד מעמיק משותף בין תלמידים ומוסדות שונים. אני מקווה שנדע ונשכיל לנצל את ההזדמנות הזאת שנקרתה בדרכנו בתקופה האחרונה, ודרך זה להרחיב את מנעד הקשר ולהתגבר על מחסום השפה, שגם הוא לפעמים קיים, אבל אני חושב שעליו אפשר להתגבר גם באמצעות אמצעים טכנולוגיים, ודרך זה באמת להמשיך ולפתח את הקשר בין תלמידים וצוותים ומורים ובתי ספר, בין ישראל והתפוצות. תודה רבה.
תודה על הדברים, ועכשיו עם האורח שלנו, מיסטר ספנסר לואיס, שלום.
היי.
אז אין לך סמיכה לרבנות, אנחנו הכתרנו אותך כרב, אבל חוזרים אליך כמיסטר.
בעזרת השם.
נכון. אנחנו מדברים באנגלית, אבל מדי פעם נשמח לשמוע גם את העברית שלך. And we want to discuss 5 periods in your life, in your educational career, and convey some messages, learn messages and lessons out of them. And let's start, discussing your childhood. You grew up in Britain, right?
Yeah. First of all, to say that real privilege to be here today with you and to talk to you, such a famous presenter, very exciting, but also to be with the other principals, head teachers of schools. It's a real honor for me. and it's given me an opportunity to think about some of the things that have influenced me personally and my own educational philosophy over the years. Yeah, I grew up here in London, and I think for me the biggest influences actually educationally were the time that I spent in Bnei Akiva here in the UK. I was very, very much involved both as a Chanich and as a Madrich. I spent time, I dedicated a year of my life to be the Oved Xinukh shel Bnei Akiva Anglia, when I was just finished, when I just graduated from university. In that period of time, I studied for my first and second degree in what was then called Jews College London. It's now called the London School of Jewish Studies. And I had some real big influences on me, probably more than school days. But you know, during that time, I was really influenced by some of the teachers that we had, particularly the late Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who was the principal of the college when I was there, and the dean of the college, Rabbi Dr. Irvin Jacobs. They were big influences on me in how I wanted to go forward in my educational story. Although, to be honest, I didn't always understand everything that Rabbi Sachs was teaching us at the time because it was very complicated. But we did our best to keep up. He was at that time, of course, a rising star. This was prior to him being chief rabbi. But I think for me, the time I spent in Bnei Akiva as a madrich, as a Oved Chinuch, was really instrumental because I was able to not only spend time passing on the messages of Torah Ve'avodah, but also working with people who influenced me. So, for example, we had on Shlichut Rav Yehuda Gilad, who I worked very closely with when he was in London, or Rav Shemesh, people who were great influences on me, enabled me to crystallize the things that I believed in. And at the same time, at Jews College, we had actually a partnership with Bar Ilan University. They used to send over lecturers to us. And again, that sort of modern Orthodox religious science kind of, and everything was in Ivrit, and that helped me a lot to לשפר את העברית, ללמוד בעברית, לדבר בעברית, and that was all really instrumental for me. And I think for those, for children in Chutz La'aretz, Ivrit is a very important thing. Ivrit, I've always believed, in as a head teacher, that Ivrit is, of course, the key to Jewish identity. Ivrit is the key to Jewish peoplehood. And so the teaching of Ivrit and the development of an Ivrit Israel culture in the schools that I've led, that sort of sits because of my Bnei Akiva background. Beautiful. Some of my friends and my contemporaries will say that it was a failed Bnei Akiva background because I'm still in Chutz La'aretz, but that's probably a different discussion for a different time.
I want to discuss Bnei Akiva as a youth movement and maybe as a tshuva movement or as a chizuk movement. I see people, especially abroad, for them, that's the key. That school, okay, you go to Jewish school, sometimes it's boring, it's not meaningful. But afternoon activities, Bnei Akiva, I heard so many stories. Rev Andrew Shaw, the head of Mizrahi UK, or Ohad Tal here in Israel, one of the heads of World Bnei Akiva and Mizrahi movement. They told me how, as teenagers, those meeting other Jewish, engaged, devoted madrichim for the first time, it changed their perspective, forever. And sometimes we don't see Bnei Akiva as something so important, especially abroad. So maybe that's the first. I think I was actually Rabbi Andrew Shaw's madrich. So hopefully there's some hatzlacha there. I'll take some. Yeah, you're the key to their success. Yeah,
I'll take some reflected glory, as we say in English. I think you're absolutely right. I think Noel generally are a really important factor in education in Chutz La'aretz, and of course, particularly in Bnei Akiva, the difference between Bnei Akiva in Chol and in Israel is huge. is huge, because all of our emphasis was about aliyah. All of our emphasis, my time, we talked a lot about chalutziut and what chalutziut means, etc. But in getting everybody to Israel, basically. And of course, in Israel, you don't have that, because they will, that's already the Hagshama Chalom. So, like, it's different. And I think at the same time, you're right. I mean, I think in terms of bringing people closer to Yadut and experiencing a living kind of Yadut that you don't.
Real Shabbat, see. For example, sometimes the house is not Shomer Shabbat, and for them it's the first opportunity to touch.
We had a lot of kids. We had a lot of kids like that. And I was lucky to be in a family where we were keeping Shabbat, but and people would come and spend time Shabbat, and I remember, Sudat Purim and all of those kind of things that they weren't necessarily having at home. So that's absolutely true.
So you mentioned Bnei Akiva. I want to show you something Bnei Akiva in Israel, what they're doing now today. So they stand there, Ben Gurion Airport, day and night, greeting, accepting the new Olim, the new immigrants from Ukraine and Russia. They started it, Bnei Akiva of Yerushalayim, Dvir Dotan from Bnei Akiva Yerushalayim. He was there, on the first night when they first came, but he's still there, thousands of new Olim. I want to show a short video of what I think it's, as you said, these are not educational things you get in school with the teacher inside the classroom. Sometimes you learn a lot when it's 4 o'clock in the morning at Ben Gurion Airport. Let's see this short video. Okay, so Bnei Akiva of London. Now let's move forward to the Israeli chapter in your life, please.
So I was very lucky that after I taught in schools, both primary and secondary schools, for a couple of years. And then I was offered the opportunity to spend a year in Israel in Bar-Ilan University in what was called the Bekhirim program. So it was called senior educators, but at that time I was definitely not a senior educator. But I think that was a reflection of the people, the availability of people in the UK. I was chosen to go. And obviously it's an expensive program. I didn't have to pay anything. And there were actually 2 Mechanchim Bechirim programs, one in Hebrew University at the Melton Center and one in the Luxstein Center in Bar-Ilan. That's the one that I was involved in, although I lived in Yerushalayim. And again, the year was a little bit disruptive because there was quite a long time. There was a lecturer strike, which is not unusual in Israel. So we missed out quite a bit. But one of the key features of the program was that every Sunday afternoon for 2.5 hours, we learnt with Professor Nachama Leibowitz, which was a life-changing experience for me.
Wow. Maybe you hear how jealous I am from Yerushalayim to London. I envy you.
it was an incredible experience, and I can remember going to her very small apartment behind the Tachana Merkazit, the old Tachana Merkazit, climbing up the stairs, and there was basically one room in which she had all of her. There was one room that was full of her gilionot, books, and then there was one sort of loungy area where we all sat very, very tight in. There was about 15 of us, and there was always either crisps, bisley, chips, sweets, because she said no one should come to my house without having something to eat. It was like, you know, ultimate balabusta. And she sat with us with one of those old telephones, you know, cordless. And she always had it next to her. And in the middle of the shiur, very often people would call her and she would flick on the phone and she would say, Nechama. And somebody had called to ask her a question, a Rashi, or a question from America, from right across the world. And she would speak to them for a few minutes, and she would say, "Ani ba'em sashil." She would close the phone, and she would continue exactly where she was before. She was already well over 80 at this point, and her mind was incredible. She never skipped a beat. She always knew exactly where we were. And on the first session, she asked us, "Do you want to study something together, or do you want me to talk to you over this year about methods of studying Torah?" And we all went for the second one, methods of teaching Torah. It was actually, and to this day, the things that I learned from Nechama about how to teach Torah and how to make Torah challenging and vital and inspirational, I still use today in the classroom.
Really? Give me just one example. I must tell you, Nechama really changed my life. I come from a completely secular background here in Israel. And at the age of 15, I discovered her series about the Parsha, Iyunim Chadashim Beparashat HaShavua. And it was the first time Torah was interesting and not boring and, you know, colorful and not black and white. And she made me think, you know, asking questions. That's what she liked. She wanted the students to be active, and I became more engaged. So, but please share examples out of your experience. When do you remember? Oh yeah, Nechama. Now I will use that method.
So, I mean, I've given a number of sessions over the last 10, 15 years to young teachers who are just starting out and what I've called teaching Torah according to Nechama. There were lots of different things. She made us think. That's absolutely right. She was ahead of her time. So she would get us to answer questions, but we were never allowed to either raise our hands or to say the answers. Because in a classroom, if you ask children to raise their hands, then the only people that are thinking are the ones who raised their hands. And if you ask people to say the answer, then only one person is doing the thinking. So you had to have a piece of paper, and she would ask you a question about the pasuk or about the Rashi or about whatever it was, and you had to write down the answer. And you had to show her the paper, and she would simply say, "Lo, lo, lo, ken, ulai." It was nerve-wracking. It was absolutely nerve-wracking to show Nechama the piece of paper, because if you got a lo, you were obviously, I mean, she smiled, but, you know, it was quite frightening. And I use that a lot in teaching. Is what we now call in England cold calling, where you don't ask children to put up their hand and you just go to them but if you ask them to write it down and you wander around the classroom. We did a lot of work on comparing psukim and comparing sections of Torah. We did lots of work on you know, keywords and what keywords in psukim and how many times it says maher in Bereshit Yudchet. All of those things are, you know, those were Nechama techniques in order to bring the text alive. And the one thing I do remember very clearly was that she knew that we came from Chutz La'aretz, some English speaking, there was some French there. And she told us you can only teach Torah in Ivrit. You cannot teach Torah in any other language. If you know 150 words in Ivrit, you can teach the whole of the book of Bereshit. And that's one thing that we have let her down in, because we don't teach it in Hebrew.
Beautiful. You mentioned Nechama. I want to show you a short video that was broadcasted here in Israel about the way she, I would say, she saw our Torah as a love letter Hashem sent us. Here it is.
הכרתי אותה לראשונה בגיל 15 והיא שינתה את חיי. מי הייתה? הפרופסור נחמה ליבוביץ'. כילדה הייתי תולעת ספרים, עם מנוי בכמה ספריות. קראתי מאות ספרים, אבל בגיל 15 גיליתי ספר שונה מכל מה שהכרתי, התורה, או ליתר דיוק, פרשת השבוע. לא ידעתי שיש דופק כזה, שיש קצב אחיד שבו העולם היהודי כולו פועם. ואיך גיליתי אותו? בזכות הספרים של הפרופסור נחמה ליבוביץ'. היא הייתה כלת פרס ישראל, מורה דגולה לתנ"ך, חוקרת נערצת, אבל היא לא רצתה להתבודד בפסגה האקדמית. היא רצתה לצאת אל העם ולהנחיל לו את האוצר המשותף של כולנו. מספרים שגם נהגי המוניות שלקחו אותה להרצאות, שמעו ממנה שיעור בדרך וגם הוסיפו פרשנות משלהם. על המצבה שלה לא נכתבו תיאורים ותארים, נכתבה רק מילה אחת, מורה. הנה אחד הסיפורים היפים ביותר על המורה נחמה. היא הייתה יושבת שעות בספריית האוניברסיטה מול פרשת השבוע, מוקפת בעשרות ספרי פרשנות. כך היא אמרה לתלמידים שהביטו בה ובערימות האלה, מתפלאים. זה לא רק לימוד של ידע, היא אמרה להם, זה לימוד של מכתב אהבה. הרי אם מישהי קיבלה מכתב מאהוב ליבה, היא קוראת את המכתב שוב ושוב, היא לומדת אותו בעל פה. תדמיינו רגע מכתבי האהבה של פעם, כן? לפני ששלחו אימוג'י של לב או סמיילי. מול מכתב האהבה, האהובה חושבת, למה הוא כתב כאן פסיק ולא נקודה? למה הוא בחר במילה הזו ולא בביטוי אחר? מה המשמעות של כל דבר שנכתב, וגם של כל דבר שלא נכתב? כך צריך ללמוד את התורה. זה מה שאנחנו עושים כבר אלפי שנים. מתעמקים ולומדים היטב, כל פרט, במכתב האהבה שקיבלנו.
Okay.
Wow.
So we discussed your childhood and the Israeli period, learning from Akiva and afterwards from Nechama Leibovich. And now you became a teacher. You're back in England, and for 19 years, you're teaching students, right?
Well, it's now over 30 years. But initially, I after I left Nechama, I came back to London and I became a teacher at King Solomon High School, which is in the northeast of London. And I started off as a teacher, and then I became the head of Limudei Kodesh, and then I became the Sgan Menahel Beit Sefer, and then I became the Menahel for the last 6 years that I was there up till 2013. Yeah.
Now, so many years meeting students every day, something daily, something routine, something maybe boring. What did you learn? I think that's the meaningful period. Maybe you were prepared during things we just discussed, but now, what tips and tools and can you give other teachers out of your experience?
I think there are particular challenges in England that I think you might find interesting and may or may not be relevant to you, because in England and to a certain extent Australia, South Africa, as opposed to America, we in the main, now not completely, but in the main, our schools are dati, modern Orthodox, whereas most of the pupils are not dati. So the challenges that we faced, particularly at King Solomon High School, and to a certain extent in my current school also at Yavne College, is that you have hashkafa, an ethos, which is dati, which is, teaching Torah, which is celebrating Chagim with the kids, where most of the families are bichlal not dati. And that's incredibly challenging. To make Torah lessons interesting and exciting, and most importantly, relevant. So you have this challenge. I mean, the obvious challenges are when you teach about kashrut, and you know that after school they're going to be eating in restaurants which are not kosher. That's a big challenge for you personally. It's a big challenge for you as a teacher in terms of your own spirit, because it can be very, very dispiriting. It can make you feel like you're failing, and you have to think long term, and you have to think about the impact of what you're doing in the long term, because they are, at the end of the day, they're children, and even though we're teaching them up to 18 years old, their influence of their family and of the avira in which they find themselves is very, very powerful. And however good a teacher you are, to negate that is very difficult. So of course we we spend a long time in schools here looking at informal Jewish education. So it's not just which goes on in the classroom, but also all the extra things that we give to them. Shabbatonim, we bring them to Israel for a few weeks. We take them to Poland. I just came back last week from Poland with a group of kids. Those things are instrumental in their Jewish identity, and you hope that what you're doing is going to have a long-term impact. But really, it's those, I think, in terms of Jewish education, those are the biggest challenges.
Mm-hmm. I want you to elaborate, because many of the teachers here are facing the same challenges. People send their kids, the parents, they send their kids to a Chemed school, Hinukh or Dati, but the home is not Mamlechti Dati and not Dati, it's Masorti, traditional. And sometimes there's a conflict. Sometimes the kid becomes excited and in love with Torah, and sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, it's hard, and as you said, it's delicate. Something is gentle. You must be Moshe kibel Torah misinai. The Torah is truth, Torah emet. How do you, I would say, how do you translate this emet to those people? Maybe they do want to change, they don't want to change. Why do they send, by the way, in Britain, why do they send the kids to a Dati school? What are the reasons there?
It's a good question, and it's a complicated question. I think for most people, there's two things. One, our schools are academically very successful. So our pupils are getting the best results in English, in maths, in science, in history, and in the national qualifications, what we call GCSEs and A-levels, sort of like Bagriyot. Our kids do some of the, we are the top schools, one of the top schools in the country. And that's one of the reasons why they send their kids, because they want them to do well and to get into the best universities in the country. And Baruch Hashem, we are successful. And that's important, because otherwise they probably wouldn't send their kids to allow us to do the Jewish education. And I think also, remember, it's Chutz La'aretz, and our parents are culturally perhaps very Jewish. And so they want their kids to mix with other Jews. They want them to be in a safe environment, without anti-Semitism, without any negative comments, without any difficulties. And so because it's a safe environment where they're mixed with other Jews, that's why they send their kids, not because they want them to necessarily become more Dati than they are. And obviously these are generalizations, not, they're always obviously exceptions.
I heard a lot about the achievements, academic achievements, and excellency of what you did in Yavne school. But at the end of the day, what you're saying is that the parents, they don't want the kids to look like you at the end of the day. Or other teachers.
No, not necessarily. There are exceptions, obviously, but no.
Mm-hmm. But it happens many times. You mentioned Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Lord, Professor. His father always thought the young Jonathan had many questions. So his father told him, great, maybe when you grow up, you'll know the answers. By the way, he didn't even go to it. I think the name of the school was Christ School. He once mentioned
Christ College.
The name of the non-Jewish school he attended. So you can understand that. And at the end of the day, he became very curious. Baruch Hashem, we all enjoy today. But so it's interesting. What most of the kids at the end of the day, do you think, when we speak about assimilation, about mitzvot, about their tradition, where will they be in 10 years?
Those questions are very difficult to answer. So, you meet students who you've taught, students have gone through your school who are very engaged, who are learning in yeshivot, who are married with, living committed lives. You get others who have gone in the other direction. You've got those who are in the middle. And, it's all incremental steps. I don't know if you know what I mean. Incremental, it's like small steps. And I think you have to hope that the things that you have taught them have been dripping like with Rabbi Akiva and the water, that dripped on the stone for 40 years. And you hope that there has an impact. Our school, my current school at Yavne, our school motto is Olam Chesed Yibaneh, which is obviously the same letters as Yavne, Yibaneh. And, you know, we talk a lot to them about kindness and about chesed and about being a part of the community. And you hope that those things are going to lead them to really be part of the Jewish community. That's what you're hoping for.
You know, it's a huge challenge. I once visited the city of David, Ir David, here in Israel. You know, we have many ancient treasures here in Yerushalayim. And one of the tour guides there, he told me, you see this group, it was a group from France, from also a Jewish, not really the T school, a Jewish school from France. And he said 80%. And I said, what do you mean? He said 80% assimilation. The head teacher there, the principal there told me, that's the number. Now, if you want to convey a message, if you want to speak to them about their heritage, you must know these are the numbers. Maybe this trip will change their life. They brought them to more than a week in Israel. I just want you to be aware, this is the group you're meeting. And that young, he was like 20, 25, an Israeli guide. He said, whoa, what a responsibility when I speak to them. I represent David HaMelech here in the city of David. When I speak to them, it can influence their future for generations.
So we're going to say that marrying out and intermarriage, if you like, is obviously a big challenge for us and something that we do talk to the kids about. It's something we talked about when we were in Poland last week. It was one of our takeaway messages for the students about the importance of being the next link in the chain. You know, I always talk to them about, you know, as you leave Warsaw, there's that famous piece, the last Moishele in the Warsaw Ghetto, and who's going to be there next year to answer the questions. It's everybody's responsibility to make sure that, you know, that they're part of the Jewish community. And I think that as our students move on to university is a very challenging period in a person's life. I think the truth is, I think it's the same in Israel. But certainly here, and don't forget, here our children are going to university much younger. So in Israel, you know, you have to go to Tzava, and however long you in 3, 5, whatever, however many years. Here, you leave school at 18, you go straight to university. Now, our hope is that they will spend some time in Israel, and we do a lot of work in trying to persuade them to spend time a year in Israel. But in the main, they're 18 when they go to university, and that is a very impressionable age. And you hope that, you know, that's very challenging because there's anti-Semitism on campus. There is anti-Israel. The anti-Israel lobby on campus is very strong, and we've had some serious cases recently with our, you know, the ambassadors had some challenges on campus, which is very challenging for our kids.
Okay, yes, you're right. So kol hakavod and behatzlacha. That's the essential mission today. So now the fourth, I would say, period, although you mentioned already you're a principal, wait a minute, you call it head teacher, right?
Yeah, we call it a head teacher, yes.
Head teacher meaning menahel. In Hebrew, we say menahel.
כן, בדיוק.
לא ראש המורים, menahel. Okay, so you're the menahel of Yavne College, Yavne High School. Tell us a little bit about Yavne, about you as head teacher there.
So I think you might find it interesting that in some ways Yavne is a bit of a unique place. The school started in 2006. I came here in 2013. The original head teacher was due to retire. Unfortunately, she passed away just before she retired in a very shocking, unexpected way. And obviously she was somebody that I knew very well because we were colleagues. Anyway, I came here in 2013, and after about a year or two, we started talking about the possibility of starting a primary school, a Bet Sefer Yesodi, which Baruch Hashem we opened in 2016. So we now have both a Yesodi and a Tichon. And we have children studying here on this campus from the age of 4 to the age of 18, 19, which is pretty unique in the Jewish community here, and is a wonderful thing. We have a Manhalet of the Yesodi, but I'm the overall head of the campus. So I'm actually officially in English, I'm called the executive head teacher. But anyway, those are just names. And the school is really local. That's what I wanted to just talk about for a minute or two. The glory of Yavne is that it is a local community. Where we are in London, officially we're actually just outside of London in a place called Hertfordshire, and the area is called Bournemouth. And almost all, not completely all, but the vast majority of our pupils come from the very local community. And it's what we call, it really is a community school. Our connections and relationships with the local Jewish community, with the synagogue, with the shul, with the Rav. The Rav of the local shul is also the Rav Beit Sefer. And so, it's really helped to make this local community thrive. And today, very interestingly, if you look, you can go on websites. So if you want to buy a house or an apartment, there are websites you can go on to look for properties to buy. All of the world has this. Mm-hmm. And now, if you go on a search and you put in properties in Bournemouth, it will tell you how far away you are from Yavne College.
Wow.
That shows you how important the school has become in the community and growing the community. And, growing kihilot is something that a school has to be the very central part of. So, as we know, when you first open a kihila, first a mikveh, then a school, and then a shul, then a beit knesset, and in that order. So, and that tells you something about the importance of mishpacha, tarat mishpacha, akamat mishpacha, and then education, and then you think about the beit knesset afterwards. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, I'm not saying that happened here. There was already a beit knesset here, obviously, in this locality. But us as a school, we are very much part of the local Jewish community, and it's very, very thriving. It's very high. And so, we take that as a big responsibility, both in terms of their secular education, which, as I said before, is essential. So the kids are doing incredibly well in their academic work, but also in their Jewish life and in the what we try to give them.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, and as a head teacher, and now we will discuss the last chapter in our conversation. Suddenly you discovered 2 years ago that everything you planned, everything you wanted to do, everything changes, the whole world changes. And I think the educational system was extremely affected by COVID, right? I mean, especially, I guess, in London, but also here in Israel, the States, everything, in a way, everything changed. And you need stability and you need something daily in order to educate the young next generation, and everything collapsed. What did you do and what did you learn from this period?
Well, I learned that we don't know everything. Or that we don't know anything. That I learned that. I think we learned to be adaptable, and to be flexible, and to the reputation. I think that British people have is they're very organized, and the reputation that Israel has is that it's a lot more last minute kind of organization, and of course that's a generalization. But I learned that you have to be gamish. You have to sort of see how things develop, and that was really interesting. I think I learned to even more to appreciate the tzevet at the school, particularly the senior people, but everybody wanted the best for the students, and that everyone was doing their best. under some very difficult circumstances. We've all seen the jokey kind of videos and memes about, you know, people trying to teach when their kids are running about, and, you know, all the challenges, you know, they're at home, but there's a delivery. But it was very challenging for people. But people did the best that they possibly could, and they did extremely well. We worked through Microsoft Teams, and we set that up before lockdown. We saw what was coming, and so we had a session with all staff on how to use Microsoft Teams. And obviously the younger staff found it easier and were more adaptable, and the older staff were struggling more, including myself. But, you know, I learned more how to use it as we went along. And I think, so that was something that we learned. And I think we provided extremely well for our pupils. I think we were very lucky, we are very lucky, that most of our pupils, almost all of them, had a device on which to study. So they had a laptop, or they had a phone, or they had a tablet. And that isn't the case in every school. You know, there are most of most of our ukhlusiya are not wealthy, but wealthy enough to have all of those devices. And in some schools, that wasn't the case. And so if you're living in a small apartment, small flat, with no garden, and the Wi-Fi is poor, then you're going to really struggle to be at home all of that time. If you have a relatively big house with a nice garden, which most of you know, in England, most people live in houses, that makes a massive difference. So you know, we learned that, and we were lucky that our pupils were able to keep up academically because of that. But we also learn, I think, that there was more. Obviously, we all know there's more to teaching and to education than, you know, 2 + 2 is 4. That's, you know, that's education. But the values and the moral things are difficult to work on online. And even now, you know, I'm speaking to you through a camera. I hope that I sound genuine, but if we're not in the same room, you know, we don't have eye contact, we don't have warmth, we don't have the things that, you know, make human interaction. And teaching is not just about what you teach, but, you know, your own dugma ishit and your own presence. Presence is incredibly important as a teacher.
I think it made it, first of all, we still say Baruch Borei Minei HaZoom, because otherwise, you know, for us here in Israel, we didn't use Microsoft Teams. The whole country Israel became the Zoom state completely. But still, I think the parents became the real teachers. I mean, the kids were looking at us. You know, it's not what they learn on the Zoom. It's what do we do when the Zoom turns off 3 times a day? How do we respond? I think that's real. We were the teachers for I don't know if 2 years, but during lockdowns and, you know, curfew and whenever there was something here in Israel, we were all focused here, concentrated. The nuclear family became maybe the classroom, and it was a huge challenge. Baruch Hashem, we hope it's over forever. Because I
think, you know, I think also for teachers that was a challenge, because what you're doing is you're teaching your students via Zoom whilst the parents are there watching you, and I think that was a challenge for some teachers. They were very conscious that the parents were in the background and listening to what was going on, and am I good at controlling the class, and am I making the class interesting? And when the parents are busy in the background making breakfast, that I think was very challenging for teachers. Yeah,
at lunch every day we were quoting the teachers, imitating them sometimes. You became very famous. Okay. So we discussed 5 I would say periods or lessons, messages: childhood in Britain, Nechama Leibovich in Israel, years of teaching as a teacher and then as a head teacher, and COVID. I want to thank you very much, Mr., right? Not Rav, Mr. Spencer Lewis. Anything else you want to add, something you want to mention and say to the teachers in Israel?
I would say that for me, I'm always a teacher first and foremost. You know, we use the word menahel, but menahel has connotations of organization and administration. To this day, I'm still teaching. I've not had a year yet that I haven't actually been in the classroom and taught. I teach Tanakh, and I teach that because I think it's really important that our teachers see that we're also in the classroom working with kids. And I think also to remember that what we do is, is Agudat Kodesh Mamash. That it doesn't always feel like it, and it doesn't always, sometimes it feels stressful when parents are making complaints and you've got more emails to deal with or all sorts of stuff. But actually, the bottom line, it's Agudat Kodesh, and I think we have to feel privileged to do this job.
Beautiful. We have one question. Ziona, the principal Ziona, is asking, after so many years of teaching, what gives you the strength, the energy, it's not boring. What makes you feel alive and engaged and interested? What are the sources of inspiration for you?
The kids, 100%. And I think even now as I sit here, last Friday, the day after Purim, there's always so much to do. And I went home and I thought, I spent the whole day in the office sitting in this chair. And that's not good. You get up, you walk around, you talk to the pupils, that's what gives you that's the lifeblood of the whole thing. It's not about the administration, but it's actually working with the pupils and seeing them develop and listening to them talk. That's really what's very special.
Beautiful. So thank you very much. And good luck in Melechet HaKodesh in London. And see you in Yerushalayim, you and your students. תודה רבה. Thank you. תודה למורים ולמנהלים. להתראות במפגש הבא עם המנהלים הבאים מהארץ ומהעולם והעצות המרתקות שלהם, שריינו את התאריכים ותהיו איתנו. להתראות.